Hello, this is Lindsay Betzendahl, Tableau Zen Master and Senior Consultant at Health Data Viz. I'm here to bring you a quick kind of tutorial, how-to, what have you, on how to use shapes in Figma. This probably won't cover everything under the sun, but try to give you some great tricks and things to use in Figma as you use shapes to bring into Tableau. All right, let's get started. So I'll go through a couple different things, but here I just want to show I often try to find some images in different places and then see if I can replicate, the design in Figma. So we're going to get into it about all the different types of shapes and things that you can create. So first of all, let's just orient to what is available in Figma for shape creation. So under our shape tools, you'll see that we have a rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, and a star. So these are our main shapes that we can use, and I'll try to go through all of them in terms of how you can manipulate them, change them, and make the kind of shape that you're looking for. There is also a pen and a pencil tool, which is essentially a tool that can create vectors or very customized abstract shapes, which I will show you as well. So let's start with the shape tool, and we'll start with the rectangle. That's they're obviously kind of in order of probably most used, I would suppose. So we can click rectangle, or you can press the R on your keyboard, and we can click and drag and make a rectangle. If you click Shift, you'll get a perfect square. That can be very helpful as well. Let's just keep a rectangle for now. As you probably know, you can see the exact dimensions of any shape that you're creating. When I'm putting things into Tableau, I tend to try to keep it to what I expect the pixels might be in Tableau, but this is not a hard and fast rule. You can certainly make things bigger. This really just increases the size of the exported shape image that you create. You can also, over here on the right, type in, if you want it specifically to be like 300 by 200 or something like that. You can type that right in and it will give you the exact dimensions. All right, so here we have our rectangle. Now I'll do another video on colors, so I'm not going to get into that now, but just for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to change the color so I can see it better against the background. Okay, so we have our shape here. We're going to zoom in a little bit. So you'll see these little dots in each of these corners of our rectangle. If you click and hold this and drag it in, you're able to change the radius of all the corners within your shape. So if you ever want something that looks like a pill or perhaps a button, you'd use the rectangle tool to get that and just drag the radius all the way in. What you'll note is if I make this bigger, I lose that exact shape now because my radius, while it's still 100, the size of my rectangle is larger, and I can actually make my radius even bigger. It's going to be obviously half of this height. So you can see how that kind of manipulates in terms of the radius. The other important thing to know about the radius part or tool within the rectangle is that you can manipulate each of the corners independently. So let's bring this back out here. So over on the right, we have our little corner radius tool. If I click this independent corners, that opens up the space where now I can change the corners independently of each other. So I can make this one 100, this one 25, this one 0, this one 5. I'm just making this up. And you'll see this goes all the way around the rectangle. Once they are independently done, you can now also adjust them independently too. So you can either type them in or adjust independently. And so you'll see now I can get some of these other types of unique shapes, perhaps, that may be useful. Okay, so that gives us that. Obviously, the other thing that we have with shapes is rotation. That's the same for anything on our Figma canvas. That's just this rotation where I can click, once I get this little arrow that looks both ways, I can hold and drag, and that will rotate it. I can also manually rotate it a particular number of degrees, depending on what I'm looking for to get that precision. Okay, let's just go back to 0. So I'm going to show you let's see, some places where I have created, I guess this is pretty good, some rectangles and how I've manipulated those. This is what I want to do. Yeah, I guess that's fine. So here you'll see I created a computer that was based on an image that I had found online and wanted to see if I could recreate that. Now this you'll see on the left-hand side is made up of a lot of rectangles, mostly some ellipses, a couple lines, but mostly rectangles. And the way that we've done this is utilize, you'll see here if I zoom in, we've created a large rectangle and able to change some of the radius. These are all actually rectangles, even though they look like lines, by changing the radius again and making them look like these long pills. And obviously we do this a lot I do this a lot for use in Tableau, where I might then add in a text and say, oops, make this more of a button. So now we have our button, and I can group this now as an entirety and export it. Excuse me. The other thing to know about rectangles is that, or shapes in general, I suppose, is that you can also do things with shapes to, let's see, I'll pick another color. To subtract or group shapes together. So let's just hypothetical. So once I have a shape, and let's say I will make another shape. This means nothing really, but let's just say I wanted to have some shape that for whatever reason looked like two of these together. I can click on one shape and then the other, and up at the top here you'll see a couple different things that show up. Components, which we're not going to go over. This is a masking, which just masked now my rectangle, and you'll see if I move one around, it's masked. I don't want that one either. But this last one over here is grouping. So we can union the selection. So now you see it has become one shape. And over on our left, we'll see it says union. And you still have the ability to access the two independent shapes and edit them as you might want to do. I'll show you that in a second. We could also subtract, which now has created the subtraction of what I have put in the middle. We can intersect, which now gives us that middle shape. Or we can exclude, and now we have all these four different shapes, or this one shape that now has excluded the middle. And the lastly is flatten. And so flatten essentially will make whatever I've done now into independent. Let's see if, let's go back here. There we go, let's try just flatten. Flatten becomes a vector, and so now I have all these vector pieces that allows me then to manipulate each of them. All right, so I don't want that either. Let's go back. Okay, so the way I can use this often is there might be, like I said, a particular shape that I'm looking for that is not easily created on its own. So perhaps I want to make, let's say I want to make a house, I don't know, with a front door. And I need this shape out of it. So I can click these two shapes again. We can do subtract. It's going to get rid of my middle that I now have. We can do the same thing if I want to do a couple, windows in here. We'll just move that over here. I can select again now my bottom shape, my two other shapes, and subtract again. And now I have, what's starting to look like a house. The benefit of doing these is, let's say, I'm just going to, there we go. is that the colors of something behind it now show through, right? So I have this gray shape, and now I have actually cut out parts of this rectangle. That's very different than layering in perhaps, a white rectangle here and some shape that's white here to make it appear as if it's got a hole in it. But this really does have a hole in it, which helps for a number of different aspects of what you might want to do. And particularly if you're exporting something to Tableau and you're going to use a different background in Tableau, you want the image to actually have this transparent section of it. So this is a great way to do that. In fact, let's see if I can pull this up. No, where is it? Maybe it isn't here. Oh, here we go. So for example, you need to see all of my messy designs that I've done. So over here, I was trying to make these people, and this is exactly where you can use a subtraction among some other things to get the shape of this face. So underneath here is a rectangle. You'll see on the side here, here is a rectangle that I have subtracted a little triangle portion out of it. And then I've also subtracted this shape in order to get what looks like a face and a smile. And that's how you can use some subtractions and using various shapes together to create the image you're looking for. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, there's one more thing I want to say about rectangles that I like. So I have done this before where I've wanted to create, it's actually in here. I wanted at one point to create this exact image, and obviously that is what I did. And what you'll see is under here, if I can get to it. And there we go. There we go. Under here, you'll see as I scroll around, these are all rectangles. They don't really look like a rectangle because I've changed its shape. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm gonna make a quick frame for this so I can explain. So let's say I want to have some really cool, background, swirly type lines or something that's going to look really neat. Now you can look at my video on frames to see why I put this frame in here. All right, so I have this rectangle, but I don't really want it to look exactly like a rectangle. As the other thing I was showing, I kind of want something to be a little curved, but I'm starting with the rectangle shape. So what I like about the rectangles or any of the shapes is you can double click and now you have access to adjust the points within this. So let's say now I want to actually change this point. I want a little more customized of how I want this to fit for whatever reason on my canvas. Now again, with a frame, you can have things go out, but again, this allows me to kind of adjust this shape. It's no longer a rectangle, it's really become some sort of polygon. But regardless, it's given me the ability to change how I want this shape to be. Additionally, just by clicking, you can add more points in this. This now allows me to manipulate this shape now. So let's say now I've manipulated this shape and I want this to be curved. There's a curvature tool up at the top here, it's called bend tool. When I click that, and now I click this, it becomes a bent line. And now I have the ability to really change how this particular point looks. So you can see now I've kind of changed, oops, I don't want the bend tool, sorry. Let's go back to the regular tool. I've changed how this shape looks. And this has allowed me to get this kind of more abstract, customized shape. So once I have that, I can now duplicate it just by pressing Alt or Option. And let's make this now a different color for purposes of this. I'll duplicate that again, just picking random colors here. And you can see now that I have these 3 shapes that I made out of a rectangle. And if I add in a drop shadow, for example, there we go. Now I have something in the corner of a viz that I made out of 3 rectangles pretty quickly. Okay, so that was the last thing I want to show about rectangles. In order to keep this quick, we will move on then to lines. Arrows are the same thing as line essentially, but I'll show that quickly. So for a line, just like in other tools like PowerPoint, you draw your line, you press shift, and it maintains your, a 0 or a 90. It keeps it straight. Lines will usually just default at this, 1 pixel. Obviously, you can make these larger depending. So you'll see here, if I make this 10 pixels, let's make this smaller. Obviously, I'm working at something that's like 500 wide right now, which normally lines, just like lines in Tableau, would probably never be that big, or at least not this thick usually. But anyway, for purposes of just looking at it, you can see how that is in fact 10 pixels. And that is what these are meaning in terms of how wide it is. It's all pixel based. Within our line, which is obviously just uses a stroke, it doesn't use a fill because, well, you can have a fill, but it's not going to really make a difference, right? Like it's the same thing. It's just a line. Excuse me. So here we have a couple options aside from the color. You can change how your start and end point are. So for example, let me make this so I can see the whole thing. Okay. So we can do, a line at the end, right? So again, our line becomes our arrow anyhow. So you have all these different options. We can make it rounded or keep it square as it defaults to. And again, same thing, you can do the other side. So this gives you a lot of flexibility for your lines in how you want it to behave, or if you want it to look like an arrow. On the ellipsis, you actually get a number of other different stroke options. And this is where you might do your dashed line. So if we click dashed line, again, let me make this smaller. What it's going to do is give you options to customize your dash. So here I can make this 5, and it's going to be if I zoom in, every 5 pixels, right? That's what that is. And the gap you can also change. So that means here we have a gap of 2 pixels and a dash of 5. See, we've got 1 pixel, it's still a dash of 5. And so you can change this based on, how you need this to look. Let's make my dash back a little larger. I need my gap to be bigger. There we go. So the dash cap, so right now you'll see here that there's none, and that means the end of my dash ends at the end, what I've said, like 5 pixels, it's going to end at that 5th pixel. You can add a square cap, which adds another pixel to it, and same with the rounded, which is going to add a little bit from where your cap is. So the end would be the 5 pixels, it's adding on, or 10 pixels, sorry, it's going to add on another one. So my gap of 5 actually now looks like about 3. Okay. Let's go back. I don't use some of these other ones as much. This is if you're joining lines together. So let me go back and make this just solid line. So you'll see if let's make another line. Let's quickly duplicate and rotate. So right here, if I put my 2 lines next to each other, you'll see I can now say, let's go back to my ellipse. Let's join this. Did that work? Yeah. So when I selected my 2 shapes, let's see, did it do it? No. All right, forget that. And let's Okay, I'll have to figure that one out. All right, forget that one. We'll do that a different time. Okay. So that is essentially what I use to do with lines. And going back to some other examples, you'll see here is where I've used some lines in this one. Sorry, those are actually rectangles. I might have just used rectangles in that one. Well, anyhow, you get the idea of using lines. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go over arrow. It's essentially the same thing. It's just it already places the arrow on your line end. So they're really the same. It's just one is just a quicker way of using it. Okay, let's move on to circles. So again, a circle you can draw, you can hold shift to make it a circle, or you can obviously manually make this whatever you would like in terms of an oval or any other ellipsis shape. Now here's where I'll share some other things, both about how to use a circle, but also about using, the stroke and the fill. So here you'll see they'll default to just having a fill and no stroke. That's how the shapes will be, whereas a line will default obviously to a stroke and no fill. We can add strokes to this, and just like with the lines, now that we've reviewed that, you can adjust the thickness of the stroke or the line, the border of your shape. Or you can take it off entirely. And we've obviously, I'm not going over colors today. That'll be a different video. But once we have a circle, there's a couple things that are kind of cool that you can use a circle with. So right away, you'll see that there's this little dot that shows up for arc. So arc allows us to adjust this shape and only show so much of the circle, kind of like a pie chart, right? So we can do that. We can also do this ratio in the middle, which changes our circle and makes it more like a donut chart, essentially. And then we also have, you'll see a start. So when I hover and it says start, that shows me where the start of my now donut chart will be. So you'll see all these things show up here. So this is the start. I started it at 90 degrees. This is the sweep, which means how much of the circle is being shown. So I can sweep that and say, I want exactly 45 degrees, right? And that gives me a 45-degree angle here. Let's make it back to right? That gave me 100. Let's go. There we go. And then this one is, let me see if I can. This one is my ratio, which is how much from in to out, right, we are showing of our circle. So if I want 50% of it, that's 50% of basically my radius. Okay, so we have, again, this is where it starts when I've made it into a donut. This is how much of the ellipse is being shown. So again, it's a 60% of the 100% circle. And the last one is the radius ratio. So 50% all the way up to 100%. Okay, and we can obviously bring that back to a circle, and we can obviously do just regular manipulate circles like this as well. So that's pretty cool. I don't use circles as much in this way in my use with Tableau, but you can kind of see some purposes for this, perhaps, whether it is, let's see here, I can even just do one of these. We're making a, whatever, let's see, right? It's like a no smoking sign. So maybe there are purposes for making these circles. And like I said, there's often times where I'm doing circles. So here is an example where I've created this, wanted to create you know, this like binder type effect. And you'll see here, if I just pull this, pull this one off. Oh, doesn't matter, pull this one off. This was a circle, or an ellipse for that matter. And so this is one of the few times where I've used it, where I've created this oval-like shape in the exact you know, size that I needed it. And then I've duplicated it. So you see if I hover here, they look like they all connect, but these are just these circles that I've made into this kind of like binder thing, which mimics what I saw in this visualization. You can also see in this example how I've used circles to do that same thing, making a triangle, or, you know, part of a circle, overlaying that on top of this one, doing some semicircles here to try to mimic what we have in this visualization. Okay, so that is circles. Now a polygon, again, a polygon is a more you know, structured one too. So here we have they'll default to a triangle. On the bottom right, it'll say count, and that is how, if you click and hold that, it will increase the number of corners of your polygon. This top one is the radius, very similar to the rectangle. So I can, you know, make this rounded shape. Very rounded rectangle, I suppose, or triangle. Right? Almost ends up looking like a circle eventually. But that is how this works. I don't use this as much as often as it relates to Tableau, but again, any of these can be the basis for something, right? So when you manipulate, you can start to change shapes very easily just by getting a base shape that is most similar to what you're looking for. And then, as I've mentioned before, kind of double clicking and then playing around with the shape. So now I have this, it's not a polygon anymore, but it was something that had these shapes or these number of corners. And I can now just mess around with it if I wanted to. So again, I'm not doing anything that means anything, but want to show you how you can manipulate shapes. Let's see, is there anything else? And the last one's a star. I've used this very infrequently, but again, the star provides you with something similar to the polygon, but gives you a lot of control over how you want this to look. So again, very similar to the kind of the circle where we have a ratio. We also have a count, very similar to the polygon, and a radius. It's very similar to all the others that we've just talked about. So you can get something that looks, you know, you can really customize this shape with these three options. And again, you can do this up here as well in the right-hand corner where you can customize your radius, your angle. This is the number of points in your star, and the ratio of, right, again, this is how much of that polygon, all the way up to 100%, all the way down to, you know, 1, well, 2. So you kind of get the idea there. And I think that is it for shapes. The next video I want to do is on the pen and pencil, and then colors. We've already done some others on text and frame. So hopefully that was helpful to get you kind of started and thinking about how to use shapes and how you can really customize these things and use them in your visualizations. And thanks so much for watching. I hope that was useful. Feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. Thanks so much.